Namaste and welcome back. We are starting the podcast today, diving right into the second limb of Ashtanga, 8 limbs of yoga. And the second limb is more personal practices, ways you can bring the yoga lifestyle into your life, into your mind, your body, your everyday, bring it into your home, and maybe even share with your family. Like we talked about last week, Yama is a list of practices that can help you think with more love and compassion about yourself, but also think with more love and compassion towards the people you interact with and communicate with. When it comes to Niyama, which is limb number 2, we are diving into practices that are more self-related, more personal, maybe even more silent practices that you observe in your life, at home, on a deeply personal level. And these parts of the 8 limbs of yoga can manifest in so many different ways. So we're going to dive right into them today. Hello, Christine.
Hello. Glad I'm here.
Me too.
So yeah, the niyamas, what Madeline was talking about, are more of these personal observances. We're still looking at morality and ethics, but we're diving to look within. And that's the beautiful thing about this 8-limbed path of yoga is it starts very much with the most accessible of how we relate to the world. And then it just starts, each step that you take is a little bit deeper and draws us a little bit more inward. So the first niyama of the 5 are Socha, which means cleanliness or purity of mind, body, heart, the holistic body we can approach it with.
Yeah. This part of Niyama can be kind of the most simple part of it. Socha is cleanliness. So pure and simple, brush your teeth, take a shower, eat clean foods.
Floss your teeth.
Floss too.
Yeah,
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
After every time you eat, apparently. Good luck. Build up to it. Socha is a cleanliness practice. So when it comes to your own personal body, your temple, you can practice that in the simple everyday acts that we practice, taking a shower, bathing, taking care of our teeth, making sure that we are bathing after we practice yoga and other exercises, of course, washing away the sweat, the toxins that leave the body, just self-care. And I think if we look a little bit deeper, we can get into the mind and think about how we can try to bring our thoughts into this place of cleanliness and purity. And as we're diving into the second limb, we can reflect on the first limb a lot. We can remember and think back to all the parts of Yama, of nonviolence and compassion for ourselves. When we talked about that in the last episode, we talked a lot about planting seeds in your mind, and that's where the beginning of your entire human expression lies. The way you think about yourself and others really will manifest and ripple out into the way you speak and communicate, and into the way that you act in the world, the way you relate with others. So getting your thoughts really, really on par with nonviolence, love, and connection, and thinking about the greater good rather than just yourself on a selfish level, we can dive into the practice and think about how we can change the world by how we think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Socha is simple when you first approach it. And even those self-care practices can be hard.
Definitely.
And so I think that that's the intelligence behind the niyamas, that it is very accessible and approachable. Okay, I can start taking care of my body in these ways. And then we can dive into how am I taking care of my emotional body and my mental body? And how do I bring purity and cleanliness to these parts of myself? And it definitely goes back to ahimsa and nonviolence. And I think that it's a lot about what the niyamas lead us to is it's important to take time to invest in yourself. And in our day and age where it's just go, 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 go. And for people who have the tendency to be like a workhorse or a people pleaser, it's really hard to actually slow down enough to see what's going on within. And it's easy to check things off your to-do list because it makes us feel accomplished. But what's more important is looking within to see how we are balanced or not balanced internally. And I think that is where we can start kind of tiptoeing around how to bring cleanliness within ourselves.
Purity.
Yeah, purity. Yeah.
With it, pure intentions or truth. Going back to Satya from limb one, this practice of truth, being really honest, radically honest with ourselves for our emotions, our mind, and our bodies. Really, when it comes to the basic stuff like brushing your teeth or taking a shower, those are more simple. You don't have to get super philosophical with those, unless you want to, of course. But when it comes to the mind and how we're thinking and viewing the world, always questioning ourselves, always checking in on a daily basis of how am I today? How am I feeling? How can I serve myself? How can I fill up my cup so I can serve others? It's really important to have that check and balances, that internal reflection to continue on your path of living the most loving, brightest light life that you can. And when it comes to Socha, you can, continually practice freeing your mind. And that also reminds me, last episode, I think we began talking about the samskaras. And in the yoga practice, samskara is a word of a bad mental habit or a bad habit that you have. Often, in my life, I look back on old journals that I have or notes that I've taken in spiritual books, in personal self-reflection. And I realize that in general, I have a natural tendency for certain self-destructing behaviors. And it's neat. I look back and I see, wow, like I'm kind of in a cycle. Like I just repeat these things over and over. Like I have this storyline in my head of feeling like I'm not good enough. And whenever I'm challenged or stressed, it's always my go-to to go back to that of, I suck at this. I'm not doing enough there. I could be better here. I'm not doing, the best job that I can in all of these parts: work, life, relationship, my body, my mind, my heart, my friendships, whatever. And that's only one of my samskaras, right? Thinking that I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy of love and connection. And I think that's a really common one for people to have. But there's so many other ways that our samskaras can bubble up and continue to keep us away from growth, away from truth, away from Socha, this cleanliness and purity of the mind. So always continuing on your journey and your path is really important, vital to your growth and your spiritual development, just your emotional development in general.
Yeah, I think, I'm just thinking about what you were saying on samskaras and these patterns, and thinking about what causes impurity in ourselves, and definitely a samskara. And then I think about like, okay, what does that also entail? Like fear or delusion or attraction or aversion to certain things. And so it's like we all have this as part of our human experience. How do we clean the mind, and how do we clean our heart, and what does that really mean? And we can talk about it in like this very like fluffy way. But I think it's because it's so tangible of like, clean your body, clean your mouth, et cetera. How can we take those really accessible approaches into these more internal aspects? And I started thinking about the breath. And the breath is, to me, to both of us, is obviously a huge part of our yoga world and thought and philosophy. It really is a tool to bring us back into the present moment. And it's so easy for our minds to wander into the past or the future. And we're constantly in this place of like, where am I doing? What am I doing? Where am I going? And this past weekend, I was exploring a really long breath work. So I was taking about like 4 breaths a minute. And I just felt so calm and present. It was as if my breath was like a shower for
4 breaths a minute.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know. It was wild.
That's a 15-second inhale.
It was 7.
Powerful
it was a
lungs.
7 breath in,
Okay.
hold for 7, exhale for 7, and then hold for 7.
That's a lot. Still.
Yeah. And, but I think that is like to take away, like, how do we clean the mind? You can see your breath almost as a shower for your internal self. And maybe you don't even approach like what it feels like to be completely like pure, but what does that even mean? How do we, what is that in today's age? But it definitely takes away some of that dross and confusion and mental chatter that is so prevalent in our lives. And it just allows us to just see a little bit with more clarity. And so we're not looking through life with a foggy mirror. We can see ourselves a little bit better. so that hopefully we can experience that purity, that cleanliness, and just taste it and then feel the goodness of it so that we want it more. And then hopefully we come back to our breath again and over and over and over again, so that we can hopefully manifest cleanliness, purity of mind, emotion, heart through our days.
Absolutely. It's really just dropping into the present moment. Your breath is always with you. It's a totally free therapist, coach, guide, truth teller, God within that you have access to always to help you to drop into the present moment. And from that place where you're in equanimity, you're not in anxiety, you're not in depression, you're in this middle place of presence, then you can really see things clearly and open your heart and your mind and practice Socha.
Yeah. And that brings us right into, really beautifully, into Santosha, which is contentment and the ability and the art of learning how to be content with all the shit that goes on in our lives. And like we were just saying, if we come into the present moment, I think that's where the secret is of learning how to be content.
I was listening to this podcast this weekend with Brene Brown, who I'm sure you guys know who she is, but if not, she's a researcher and is all about vulnerability and emotions and the psychology of being a human. And she was telling the story about this man who his entire life he decided that he wasn't going to become too attached. And when it comes to yoga, in Yama, one of the first limbs is non-attachment, freedom, right? So I think he maybe had good intention of, okay, I'm going to go through life and try to avoid extreme pain by feeling a little bit less attached. I'm not going to feel as joyous or as connected to this or that in my life. And namely, the story is about him and his wife. So this man's going through his life trying to avoid suffering and pain, and his means to get there was by feeling a little detached, not fully stepping into extreme joy and happiness because he was scared of losing it. So the story is he goes throughout his whole life with this storyline in his head. And then he's in his 60s or 70s, him and his wife are in a car accident, and his wife was killed instantly in the car accident. And he says in retrospect and reflection that the moment he realized that she was gone, he realized, okay, here I am in the face of this extreme suffering. The only realization he had was I should have leaned more into joy and happiness and truly lived. So that was oh my gosh. Because I think when it comes to the yoga world, a lot of people are often talking about non-attachment and thinking, okay, the goal to finding enlightenment or freedom and peace in your mind is to be non-attached. And it's not apathy, not caring, being non-attached, that you're not fully living as a human. But in my mind, it's more so allowing yourself to be fully human, to experience highs and lows, but remember things like your breath that can help get you back in the present moment. I'm here right now. Things are good. I'm taken care of. And no matter how much suffering and pain I have, it's going to come back up. It's going to get better. And I'm going to experience ecstasy and bliss and joy once more. And just trusting that flow of humanity, that it's going to oscillate from good to bad, dark to light, and it's going to move. But not shying away from experiencing it all. And it's not easy to do.
Yeah. That really reminded me of I always go back to nature as one of my greatest teachers. And I think about the seasons. We don't really have that many here, but the 4 seasons.
We have that hotel, okay.
That they really are a great teacher to think about life and to remind ourselves that nothing is constant and everything, the only thing that's constant is change. And I've been experiencing living into the future, and I know that grips me and takes away from my present joy and experience here and now. And the same thing is the people who have the tendency to live in the past are robbed from the joy and life right here and now. And so how can we actually experience contentment if we're oscillating between past or future. And instead of just being, this is what I'm going through, this is my situation, whether it's great or horrible or anywhere in between, and seeing it, and somehow even if it's hard, not necessarily appreciating it, but knowing that it's not a mistake. And I think about like earlier on in the podcast, a few podcasts ago, and I was sharing my story, and I look back at my life and I'm like, wow, it was kind of like wild run. But nothing was a mistake. And even in those hard times, that was a lesson for me to learn, whether it was from a person or a situation or something that I was doing, but it led me to where I am now. And so if we start thinking like that's how life wants to teach us, it wants us to grow and evolve. And if we have that perspective, I think it frees us from the fear of why am I going through this? And being, instead of, wow, this is really intense. It's okay. It's going to be okay. There's a reason this is happening, and it will pass and will take me somewhere new. And so, and having this kind of joy and excitement about life, instead of like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, this is happening. But seeing what's on the other side of the veil and not just shying away from it.
Definitely takes courage.
Yeah.
Beautiful transition to tapas, the next limb.
Yes, yeah.
Or the next part of this limb. Tapas is a combination of personal discipline and this internal heat. Tapas is a fire and a strength. And to be able to step into the truth and be fully human, whether shit hits the fan or whether you win the lottery, it takes courage.
Yeah.
It takes so much strength to face every day, your job, your relationship, to be who you are, to be totally open and honest about your situation, and pursue greatness for yourself and for the world. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of discipline. It's not easy to continue to grow and to always be evolving and improving. It requires a lot of energy. And luckily for us, the 8 limbs of yoga are this really beautiful offering of tools that can help us to find more grace and peace and trust in our hearts and our lives. But that doesn't mean it's going to be easy to walk the path of finding a better life for yourself in your mind or your heart. It's not like it's going to be easy all the time, Yeah. Sometimes it's going to be really challenging. So cultivating tapas is super key. And you can do that in a lot of ways, cultivating this internal fire, this deep-rooted at your core, this sense of strength and the will to carry on and continue, no matter how heavy the load may be. Personally, I've gone through different seasons of my life where I've cultivated tapas through my own physical practice by doing Ashtanga yoga or specific power yoga, power vinyasa that I had to dedicate myself to every day, even if I didn't want to wake up at the crack of dawn before sunrise, I would. And I dedicated myself to the practice because I trusted, I put my heart and soul in the hands of the practice and really cultivated trust and faith. And then the reward for that is this internal strength to face your demons and face your darkness and work on yourself. So tapas can be cultivated through physical exercise or that type of thing, or it can be cultivated through discipline of the mind and making a commitment to yourself to continue on your journey as a yogi or any other practice, to continue even when things get challenging and hard to handle, and really trusting yourself, I think, at the root of it, that you can. They say that God doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. And, you can decide if you do or do not believe in that. But I think that we're really capable as humans of so much more than we generally think we're able to achieve and handle. And we're really powerful beyond measure when it comes back to, all these superpowers we have, like our breath and love and our ability to help ourselves and help each other. We just have to believe that we can to keep going.
Yeah, tapas, we both have a very similar path with Ashtanga. And I'm really grateful for those years of just, no matter what, waking up and getting on the mat and just practicing. And, one of the founders of this practice, Ashtanga, said, practice in all is coming. And that has stayed with me a lot because it's a practice. And I really appreciate that the yamas and niyamas aren't judgmental, or there's no condemnation in them. It's just, here's these guidelines for you to have a more holistic and fulfilling life. And I think we have to keep reminding ourselves to just keep going. And that's what tapas is just keep practicing whatever that practice is for you. Don't lose sight of it. There's a concept in the asana practice when we were practicing yoga, which is we call drishti, which is where you set your gaze when you're focusing. So whether you're looking at your nose or your fingertips in a pose or your toes, or just one spot to help you balance, this is the idea of leading us into what we call dharana, which we'll explore a little bit later, but the idea of concentration. And I think that's so important with tapas, is to have something that you're seeking to strive towards. And maybe that's enlightenment. Maybe that's healing a relationship. Maybe that's healing your body, your mind, whatever that's going on. And maybe it's just you want to be healthy and you have this goal in front of you, and there's going to be things and obstacles that come and try to pull you away from it. But the more you keep pursuing that goal, those obstacles just seem less and not as strong and bold and gripping you away. You're just kind of plowing through and just focusing on where you need to go. There's this story that always resonates with me with tapas, and it's about a goldsmith. And a young girl comes into the shop to observe the goldsmith working. And the young girl asks the goldsmith, "Oh, how do you know when you're done, firing the gold?" And he says, "When I can see my reflection in it." And it just always reminds me, wow, okay, we got one life, we got so much work to do, and we just keep going. And when are we done? When we can really see our deepest self in that, and our own self. And manifest and move towards our own greatness. And that looks different for everyone. And so your path might be like this and mine like this, but we can also cultivate uplifting each other on our paths. Say, "Oh, I can see your goal is this. Okay, I'm going to help you achieve that," and not be a distraction, but rather be a place of encouragement for one another. And so then it becomes a little bit more collective, because this part of the niyamas are very much individual based, but we're still in it all together. We're still on the path.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the next limb is svadhyaya, which is self-study. It is kind of a bridge after tapas, self-discipline, because the practice of svadhyaya is to have the austerity, the personal discipline, to pursue your own growth without a teacher, without a parent, without a boss telling you what to do. It's this deeply rooted in your heart drive to grow and to achieve more and to develop your own character and your own offering for the world. And svadhyaya is really, it matches tapas, because you need this discipline to do the work. And, if it comes down to whether or not you want to go outside and play and have fun and join your friends and
all
do whatever, do your own personal growth work and make time for your own self-care, make time for what you need. Carve out that extra hour to go to a yoga class or do your practice at home, or even just to take 10 minutes to meditate or relax to recharge yourself. Svadhyaya is this practice of that own personal development paired with discipline. And traditionally, that's how it is depicted or described as. the own personal discipline to read the spiritual texts and to study and to understand the historical texts, growth, personal development, becoming an enlightened being. But in a more modern sense, Svadhyaya can be introspection and observing yourself, developing mindfulness, and realizing that you kind of have two parts of your mind. You have one part in your mind that is always talking, always trying to understand. It is labeling things, judging people, judging yourself. And then you have the second part of your mind that's the observer, that is really, I think, your consciousness or your soul, your ability to kind of take a bird's eye view and look down into reality, the moment of your mind, your heart, your body, and take a present mindful assessment of the storyline your ego mind, your chatterbox, monkey mind is telling you. So you have these two parts, one that won't stop talking and the other one that is just observing, taking everything in without judgment. And when it comes to practicing Svadhyaya, this act of introspection, I think for me, even realizing that I had the ability to self-reflect and observe was the big kicker. I would always have a storyline, a reaction, an instant response in every situation, whether it was good or bad. But then realizing I should cultivate mindfulness where I'm observing myself, observing my reactions. When I cultivate that mindfulness, then I can slow down and slowly decide what my action is going to be, what my response is going to be to the world, whether it's a good situation or a bad, and then really stay connected to my values of love and truth and non-harming, all these other practices that come before this.
Yeah, I just was thinking about exercises of like how we can self-study, and definitely meditation. It is, scientifically proven the benefits, and then also just being able to calm the mind and to see what's really underneath what you're going through. It's really easy for us as humans to project, and situations arise and you're like, might gravitate towards different opportunities and et cetera. But when you sit down with yourself and you kind of basically psychoanalyze yourself and what's going on in a non, condemning way, like, why am I repeating this pattern? Why am I actually doing this? Like, why have I made that choice? And that's hard because, again, we've already talked about several times the not wanting to slow down and relax. And that relaxation part of it is when we can calm our mind and our nervous system and utilize the breath and meditation, then we can enter the quality of introspection with a little bit more objective mindset rather than being so subjective with ourselves. And that is obviously almost impossible to be objective with ourselves, but it gives us just a taste of it. And I think another part of this idea of self-study is honesty. And I think a great practice is taking your time. It sounds really weird, but actually look at yourself in the mirror and just kind of give yourself a heart-to-heart and, speak kindly to yourself and just to take a moment to really like see what's in front of you. Because, in truth, we actually don't really see ourselves unless we're looking in the mirror, and, I see you, we see each other. But it's so hard to actually look at ourselves within. And there's definitely, obviously fear or judgment that from some scars, from these patterns of like looking at ourselves. But that is where we're starting to dive deeper into the higher self. So beyond the facade of like our ego and what we project to the world, everyone does. We do it all day long. And then wait, who is Christine? Like, what does that mean? This embodiment of life, moving through life. And Svadhyaya gives us this opportunity to check in with ourselves. It's asking us, hey, please check in. Hey, what's going on? Come back to yourself. for me, I'm super busybody, whether it's work or being active, or meeting friends or connecting. And one of the ways that I slow down and have an entrance into svadhyaya is through restorative practices, which really drop me down. And then I'm able to be like, oh, that's what's going on. And lastly, with svadhyaya, it's cool because not only are we like reading the story, the narrative of our lives, but at the same time, it's asking for us or giving us the opportunity to like revise and edit and continue to write what we want to write, so that we don't have to like follow that continual pattern. It's like, oh, I'm finally recognizing this pattern. I know it's not serving me. Okay, I need to let that go and create a new pattern to rewrite a story that's going to unfold a little bit more beautifully. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's never too late.
Yeah.
It's never too late to change, to grow, to become a brighter version of yourself.
Yes.
So the last limb we have with Niyama is Ishvara Pranidhana. And this practice is all about trust in my mind. This word, Ishvara Pranidhana, these two words, is a surrendering to the divine, is a trust in the divine, and putting your trust in the flow of things, in the universe, in a higher power, that everything will ebb and flow, sometimes go down, sometimes go up, and it'll all be okay. And that in this moment, everything's okay. So to me, all of these practices really culminate in this ending point, this last point of Ishvara Pranidhana, where we have to work hard to face our demons, our darkness, to get honest with ourselves, to grow, to call ourselves out on our bullshit and be truly honest with ourselves, to look in the mirror. I do that too. To look yourself in the mirror, in the eyes, and speak. And you can't hide from yourself when you do that. If you stand in front of your mirror and you watch your eyes and your facial expression and you say something to yourself, whether it's good or bad, you can see your facial response, your emotional response in the physical. You cannot hide from yourself when you get to that level of face-to-face contact with yourself. So you should definitely try that because it's super powerful. But when you have cultivated all of these practices with yama and niyama of love and tapas, the strength to continue, and introspection, looking at yourself, looking at your heart, your deep intentions, and practicing all of these aspects in every area of your life, you've given, done your best. What it comes down to at the end of the day is surrender, is trust and letting go. Because at the end of the day, we're not in control, and we have to surrender to the flow of life because we're not in control of the people around us or just the nature of things. We're not even 100% control of our own bodies and our own minds. We can guide ourselves in a certain way. Like Christine said, you can look at yourself and your mind objectively, but you can't be 100% objective. You still have, the animal brain. You still have emotions. We're complex beings. I think this last part of it is really just this deep-rooted trust, presence, and surrender to your life.
Yeah. And it's scary to realize, to not only realize, but to accept that in some regards, we're really not in control. And there is this quote that I heard recently, and I've been like mulling it over. What does it really mean to me, to life? But it was saying, paraphrasing, are you willing to risk your own significance for the benefit of everyone else? What does that mean? And I started realizing it's the idea of like, not my will, but thy will be done. And basically, like, I'm going to step out of wanting to just drive where I want to go and have that idea of like, okay, maybe I thought this was how it was supposed to be. And it's turning out that life is kind of taking me this way. And so instead of fighting it And then we're going to move to fear if we fight it. But if we let it happen and we trust that there's a reason why it's happening, there's a little bit more adventure to it and excitement of what is going to happen? How is this going to pan out? And so I think approaching Ishvari Pranadhana as this idea of surrender as like, wow, this is really freeing, and that I don't have to have it all figured out, and that it really opens the door for a lot more possibilities and potential and connections and networking and for yourself and for the people around you, because you never know who you'll meet or who you run into, what kind of spark that happens. I mean, that's how we met. And just, trusting life. There was this, I was in a class earlier this week, and this teacher kind of brought me to tears because it was just the way he presented this idea of trust was really beautiful. So it was, you interlace your hands and you place them over your heart. And it was a mudra of unshakable trust. And you're pressing your hands back into your heart and vice versa. And you're just breathing into that space. And I just felt this like overwhelming power of like, wow, the idea of surrender is actually already within. Like, it's almost like innate, like your body, I think like your body, your mind, our human experience wants to surrender and wants to let go of rigidity and like control and like, this is how it has to be. And I've seen people in life who like have tendencies of like, OCD or wanting to be in control. And people who've been close to me, and I can see how that, even in those tangible ways, robs them of the present moment and robs them of life experiences. We don't want that, but we create it for ourselves. So I think like that, what you were saying, that culmination of coming, like those practices lead us to be able to risk it all and to say, okay, all right, I did this work. It's not just like, all right, I'm ready to go. First day I wake up, I'm ready to like risk it all. It's about doing these practices, taking the time to clean your mind, clean your body, to build a discipline and focus in your life, and to move towards contentment and to focus on introspection, so that with that knowledge, with that experience, then you can let go and trust and hopefully surrender.
Absolutely. So for your homework this week, I'm thinking we're going to kick it up a notch and do two possible assignments.
Oh, okay. What are they?
Optional. 2 ideas.
No,
First
mandatory. Of all, I'm just kidding.
First of all, look yourself in the mirror. I think if you are questioning your own truth, your own values, trying to navigate your individual journey, how do I find my peace, my freedom, my happiness? Reflecting on what you hold of value is very important. When I first heard that, I was like, what are my values? Oh my gosh, I've been, calling myself a yogi or a spiritual person for all this time. And I'm like, what are my values? I don't even know. It just takes such a long time to even, I think, realize or cultivate them. So I would like to invite you guys to look in the mirror and ask yourself a simple question of what matters to you, what truly matters to you. And maybe you have to ask that question to yourself multiple times. If you say, what matters to me? Money, getting rich. See how your body responds, see how you feel physically from that response, and try to dive deeper and ask yourself multiple times. And maybe it takes a few days or a few years to get there. But when you can cultivate your values, maybe it's just a couple, maybe it's love, maybe it's just love by itself. Maybe it is being of service to others, or, taking care of yourself so you can take care of other people, whatever it is. Then once you have that kind of daily living intention, then you can direct your mind back to it and practice all parts of Yama and Niyama a lot easier. The second homework, possible idea, is to develop a habit, a positive habit of going to your breath anytime you are challenged. You could be in a meeting. You could be in traffic. You could be in a conversation with a relationship. Try to take 3 to 5 very slow exhales and inhales and see how your mind and your body changes afterwards. Thank you guys for listening today. We are done with the yamas and niyamas. I'd highly recommend to listen to these episodes on the reg. It's easy to forget all the different practices. And if you guys are curious maybe about some resources or where you can read a bit more, we'll link a couple different books on interpretations of the niyamas in other books or books completely dedicated to these 2 parts of the 8-limbed path. And there'll be really great resources for you to grow. Thanks for listening. Sending you guys a lot of love. Namaste.
Namaste.